The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, thank you for being patient as we got started. Welcome to the monthly LawHelp Interactive call. This is the call for April. We have a very exciting call this month, so I'm just going to run very quickly through announcements and updates, and then we're gonna switch to our presenters. We have a really great team of people working on improving child support workflows. And so that's gonna be the main concern of the call. Couple announcements is that the call will be recorded, and we will share it and post it on the LHI resource page. All of you are on mute, but if you wanna participate, raise your hand. We're gonna try to unmute people at the end and have a back and forth and share either ideas or projects or any other thing that the community wants to share. This is very quickly our agenda, and we have our presenters noted. So what I'm gonna do is just very quickly talk about updates. We have the Equal Justice Conference coming up. There is a reentry pre-conference that's being run by Community Legal Services of Philadelphia. I'm gonna be there learning about reentry, and if any of you are going to be there, let me know. Would love to meet you and hear what you're doing about reentry. Related topic at the bottom of the slide is that there is an evaluation reentry funding call right now that's due in August. If anybody is interested connecting with researchers or talking about evaluation of online reentry projects, reach out to me, or April Sclater from Harvard University is also looking for projects that may have online features. The other one that's coming up, another funding on evaluation, is a domestic violence evaluation grant that I talked about last month. The deadline is May 4th. And so if any of you are going for that evaluation and you have a component of online form on LHI, let me know. We'd love to keep abreast of how that goes and if there's any support on that. Quick news, our statistics are out. We are going to, I've actually already started reaching out and one-on-one to states and programs to understand a little bit more the patterns of utilization this quarter. If anybody reviews the statistics and wants support, feel free to reach out. We can help you do outreach, do planning for updates or upkeep, or even help you troubleshoot. So as you review your quarterly statistics on the server, don't be shy, reach out and we can see what's going on in your state with the utilization of your forms. The other good news is that the TIG grant cycle is now at the next stage. They're starting to invite programs that applied for document assembly projects. So if anybody is doing a document assembly project, whether it be new or a modification or an ongoing one, feel free to reach out during the application period. I can work with you, and we have a lot of really great samples and materials that you can look at for guidance on your application, which all of them are going to be due in June 4th. And the last thing is that LSE is doing an innovation blog, and they did one on online forms, on the future of online forms. I'm putting the link there. I encourage you to listen and reach out if you had feedback. I am going to stop, and Miranda, I'm going to share the screen with you. Miranda is going to show a quick treatment of an LHI page. So just 1 second.
Thanks, Claudia.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to talk pretty quickly because I want to get out of the way so we can hear the exciting presenters who I know everyone joined to listen to. But just wanted to follow up from our last call and really the calls preceding that on how we continue to refine and improve the look and feel of LHI. And one area we've been concentrating on recently is the start interview page. So on the left of the screen is the sample we showed you for changes to the screen, and on the right is an updated version based on feedback. So really quickly, based on feedback, there's less welcome text. We don't want to overwhelm users, so we've greatly reduced that amount of text. The description defaults to open, but we'll make the option to list your description as optional. along with the for use in state. The video is moved down to the bottom of the screen. It's defaulted as open, but when a user logs on to the Start Interview page, you'll see the top of it, so they won't see the whole video. The icons are removed within the boxes so as not to confuse users. And the Start button, the Get Started button, or the Create Account or Log In button are up higher on the screen. So there's some other changes here that you can check out. As Claudia mentioned, we'll add the slides and the recording to the Resource Center. Feel free to reach out about it. And also we will let partners know via the listserv when the updated treatment of this page is available for viewing and testing in our staging environment. So Claudia, feel free to grab back the screen.
Thank you, Miranda. So I'm going to we're going to change gears now, and we're going to start with our partners in South Carolina. We're going to have Gail Dubose, Kenneth Elliott, and Pat Muller talk about a project that they did in South Carolina in partnership with Legal Aid, the bar, and a lot of really great groups. So let me just get the slides here started. And Pat or Gail or Kenneth, are you guys ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, let me just get the slides back on. Apologies. Okay. So.
Okay, Claudia, are you ready?
I'm ready. Tell me when to turn.
Oh, I will do that. I'm Gail DeBose. I'm with the South Carolina Center for Fathers and Families. I am the Jobs Not Jail Director, which means I run the ATI, or Alternative to Incarceration program there, and also the legal coordinator, which means if it's got anything to do with the law, I have something to do with it. I have way too long of a title, but that's what it is. I previously worked for Child Support Enforcement for over 30 years and was the chief attorney there. I'm joined today by Pat Muller and Kenneth Elliott of South Carolina Legal Services, two of our partners in multiple endeavors, but primarily today it's about the Pro Se Modification and the Pro Se Visitation Project. And I guess I should correctly say I've joined them for just the reason that what happened today, we were a little reason where things weren't working, and I would have panicked had I been home, but here I just sat and let Kenneth and Pat take care of it for me. They tell me that since this today is really going to be about collaboration, relationships, and funding, they're going to just sit back and be available for questions if you've got some on the technical end. But one of the things I talk about with our staff is about relationships. When we have new staff and do an orientation, I talk about the relationships with the courts, the clerks of court, the judges, and everybody that we might encounter, and ask them that they remember that if I teach them nothing else, it's all about relationships and how important and crucial they are. I realize that South Carolina is a smaller state, and we may have a bit of an advantage in that because a lot of us already know each other because sometimes we're the only game in town. In our case, we are a statewide fatherhood program. We are the only one in the country, fatherhood program in the country that is statewide. And I say statewide with great pride. We have just done this within the last 2 years, expanded to that point. But part of what we did with the Fatherhood Project was to apply for a grant, and if I can have the next slide. And what we applied for was a SIP grant, and I'm not going to talk about the grant itself much because these are competitive grants, and they're a little harder to come by than some of the other funding that the other speakers are going to talk to you about. But it's important in the scheme of things of how all this came about. The Fatherhood Program, the Center for Fathers and Families, applied for this grant. But when we did it, we also brought our partners in even before as part of the grant application. And legal services was part of the grant, and they were the big part because they were going to provide the legal part and do the online automated forms. What really happened out of this is we were able to get enough funding to actually do some videos in addition to the automated forms. We were able to do posters and we were able to, do some media and some promotion that may not be available if you were just doing the other way. One of the things about our posters and videos, we were able to get a website, Modify Child Support SC, and we have a series of short videos that we did as part of this grant. We tried to keep all the videos under about less than 5 minutes, most are 2 to 3, so that somebody could go through all of them. But if after they've gotten paper served and they're getting ready to go to court, they could go back to just the one that says how to prepare for court and what to do in court. So this was a bonus that you won't have from LawHelp Interactive. There's a link right here that goes straight to LawHelp Interactive. So for some folks, this is probably a little friendlier entry because it's a little warmer, more welcoming than, because our state has lots of forms now. We're real fortunate to be able to get funding for that. What this funding also did was give us a place to do some, get forms approved by our court. That was one of the main things that anybody working on this is going to have to do. We did not have statewide court-approved forms for pro se modification. And Claudia, the next slide. I think it's real important that one of the things we talk about is who our partners were. As you can see, we had a lot of partners. The center was the grantee. Legal services was our primary partner for any kind of technical assistance. They were a partner and a vendor in this case. We had a vendor we just paid who was not a partner to do the videos. We had court administration, which is in South Carolina, runs the courts, and probably a similar agency in every state. We had DSS Child Support Services and the Access to Justice Commission here in South Carolina. Some states don't have that. If you have one, I expect all of the legal services folks are already partnered with them at some point. Our South Carolina Bar Foundation. South Carolina has a mandatory bar. The foundation is an outgrowth of that. It really is like any other foundation, so that the bar can do some other things that are tied into legal education and the justice system. And we also had the counsel to the Chief Justice, and basically the name of that person, kind of the title says it all. We really were fortunate at the time we were doing this that we had a Chief Justice that was really working hard on trying to support self-represented litigants and working on the pro se forms and was supporting all of this. One lesson learned from this project is I wish we had gotten a member of the private bar. I don't know that they would have been as available or as accessible as some of our other partners we had, but it would have been nice to have had a little more input and to let the private bar a champion with the private bar for pro se litigants. And I think that would, if they'd been involved in this process, they could have been our champion. And I do want to talk to you about a little bit about the legal service partnerships. Not only was it the technical, we also had legal service attorneys on this team who helped us, who did a lot of modifications and helped us get the wording right, simplify the language, make sure we had everything done correctly. And I do think sometimes in the legal services, it's kind of like when I worked at that social services for 30 years, we kind of think, oh, people don't see ourselves as the experts, but legal services is the expert. They're certainly the experts in automated forms here. They're often the expert in various areas of the law because they do them so much and have such large caseloads. Certainly with anything to do with self-represented litigants in South Carolina. And frankly, they're probably the most cost-effective because they've done it and they can build on what they've already done. Now, the next slide. The big bonus outcome of the pro se modification project was that we got funding for a pro se visitation project from DSS Child Support. They provided the funding for this project. Now, it was much less than the SIP grant, but that's okay, because at this time we were able to do it cheaper. We were able to build on the forms we had. At that point, Kenneth had developed the financial declaration, which is my recollection of it. I think it was the first one in the country, and it was, you should have seen his office, papers wrapped all the way around his room trying to just get it done. But it was a huge accomplishment. But we use a standard financial declaration, so we didn't have to reinvent that. We could use that. We could use some of the summons. We could build off some of the complaints. Lots of the forms we were able to reuse. So it was very cost effective to keep with the same partners. We kept the same video partners because we were able to get funding to do some of the videos. And what they were able to do was to bring in the videos we had used in the past. We were able to set up with the same background. And the only thing we couldn't figure out was how to get Richard Barr, who is the spokesperson in these videos, to get rid of his gray hair. He'd gotten a lot more between the first two, but I think as we cut and clipped him in, I don't think anybody will notice. We even had him put on, he had to go scrounge around and find a really similar tie, but I think we're good on that. So, but one of the things that we had was that we knew what we were doing. So we switched out some partners here, of course, not the partners themselves, but like DSS sent over their access and visitation workers, those folks who were experts in visitation this time, and rather than the child support folks. Legal services sent us different attorneys, who ones that did more focus on the visitation than on the child support. So, but we built on the same companies and agencies were out there that worked with us, but we were able to build on what we had. We would have loved to go on from there and do some other things, but we didn't. That hadn't worked out, and was the funding and other things at that point too. Legal aid was working and has been lots of efforts and lots of things, and I think their online application form was one of the things that kind of been put on hold and jumped to the forefront when this was done. Can I have the next slide, please? All right, this is we had a website, the same setup as scvisitation.com. That's the same slide, Ricky with less gray hair. So, but this one was set up the same way. The important thing here for you to know is that DSS funded this. It was funded through DSS child support. They were a source. DSS child support has funding. They get, don't know this, I know the other speakers will go more into this. They are at a 67% funding rate, where most other things are at 50%. So you, instead of getting a dollar-to-dollar match, you get a 2-1 match. If you can go to the next slide, please. And that's some tips for you on getting into this and legal services getting access for a self-help center or what. This is a slide we had that shows some of our partners with the Center for Fathers and Families. DSS, as you see on there, is pretty big and bold. They are our primary funders, so we obviously already have a relationship with them, an ongoing and continuing one. And for some of you who don't have a relationship with DSS, do the same thing. Look at your partners. Do some of your partners. Could they introduce you? Could they, all go out for coffee or go to lunch? In the South, we like to eat, so that's kind of the way we start things, to start relationships. So, see if you got one of your folks, maybe it's a reentry program, a domestic violence program, a homeless shelter, a veterans program. All of those things might have a partnership somewhere with DSS. It doesn't even necessarily have to be with child support. But get yourself in there to meet these folks and to learn about these folks. I bet some of your local attorneys in your local offices are going to know the child support attorneys because they know them from handling cases or even just seeing them at the courthouse or being classmates in law school. So if that's what this is, look around, how do I get to DSS and how do I get to child support? Well, maybe it's through one of your other partners that already has a relationship. And that's a good way for you to build a relationship and work on getting it. It may be that you don't want to be the grantor or the primary person, because that's the person that has to do the reports and the management, the funding and all. Maybe you want to be like this grant was, where you just get a nice chunk in the check, and then you're responsible for your product, but not for management of the grant. And that may be a better place for you, as opposed to being the actual person who is applying for the funding sources. Can I have the next slide, please? This is just our contact information. I've been told Kenneth has 2 T's on the end of his name, so his name and his email address both need to be corrected. So if you would please do that, just keep this information. You contact us if you have questions about what and how. And I think, Kenneth, Pat from Legal Services, the folks from the Bar Foundation, Access to Justice, and others would all feel that this was a great way to get something all of us wanted. And for very cost-effective way, very great return on our investment. You could not have gone out and hired it at the cost that we did it. So, and that we're real excited about it. We'll keep looking for future opportunities, and we trust that some of this will help you to get some funding and get some extra self-help centers or dollars for forms or whatever your state might need. Thank you for your time. Claudia, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Gail. Wonderful, wonderful sharing. And I'm going to switch gears now and give the floor to our partners, Karen Lash and Renee from SRLN, and Karen being a professor at American University. So let me just switch gears. And for the people in the audience, if you have questions, you can chat them, and we can try to read them at the end of the segment, or you can raise your hand. We're gonna try to leave a little bit of time afterwards to do questions and comments, maybe get a little conversation. But thank you, Gail. Very inspiring, amazing work. Really a model. So Karen, let me.
Yes.
Are we ready?
Sure.
Okay. Tell me when you turn.
Yeah. Well, go ahead and call up the slide deck. But in the meantime, I would echo the praise of Gail and her colleagues. It's always inspiring to see that level of collaboration with so many different stakeholders all collaborating to accomplish a shared goal. It's really exciting to see. And thanks as well to Claudia and Pro Bono Net for organizing this and putting a spotlight on this intersection between successful child support programs, legal aid, the courts, self-help strategies, and, as Gail demonstrated, the prospect for tapping into some federal funds. So my role is to sort of go from the ground back up to the 30,000-foot level and connect all those dots. And Renee will come in with this amazing guide that SRLN has created to sort of help walk you through the details. So we use a shorthand, this title 4D or just 4D, to refer to the part of the Social Security Act that established the federal-state partnership to provide child support services, as well as the federal funds that can be used for state child support agencies. Next slide. So I come at this through the lens of my former work with the Justice Department and White House Legal Aid Interagency Roundtable, where this big idea was our North Star. That there are many government programs that serve low income and other underserved populations that are more effective, more efficient, produce better outcomes when legal services, and by that I of course include self-help legal services, are among the services that are being provided. And that's going to be true if the government program aims to help all kinds of categories of people, whether it's pregnant teens, homeless youth, homeless veterans, helping people with criminal records get jobs, and of course, increasing child support payments. Claudia, can you advance it?
Claudia?
Yeah, you didn't see it change?
I didn't, but
Page up, okay.
because now we're on to the next slide, which is the one that says legal aid helps child support programs. I don't know. Do other people see it?
Is that the one you need? Is that the one you need? The one that says Massachusetts?
Yeah, sure. Go. You can skip the second one and go to the third one.
Okay. This one?
We're not seeing it, Claudia.
Oh, I don't know what's happening. Apologies. Let me just pause.
Okay. Well, I can keep going. Because the next step from that sort of global concept is to drill down more, yes, on how on legal aid and child support. Oh, back up one. And just make the point that is illustrated by this slide, that there's no lack of data and studies that make the connection between legal aid and child support. There's dozens of these state economic benefits of legal aid studies that pretty much all include real bragging rights about the role that legal aid plays in helping to secure child support payments. These are just two quickly and randomly selected examples from Massachusetts and Florida, but there's lots of others. And I also like to point out, because it's federal, the Department of Veterans Affairs, every year they do a study of homeless veterans and their social service providers, and every year legal assistance for child support problems always shows up among the top 10 unmet needs. So these just a couple of examples to illustrate what legal aid has to do with child support. And the next slide. So when you take that information, and it is, which is known by the Federal Office for Child Support Enforcement, which was established to support the states in implementing, partnering on effective strategies that increase child support payments. So you combine that legal aid information with these two data points. First is, we all know on this call that most parents go through these scary and sometimes complex processes without any kind of legal help, which of course makes it more challenging for families, but also for the state child support agencies to fulfill their mandates. And then our federal friends in the Office for Child Support Enforcement also know that there are studies that show that matching the payment amount with the parent's ability to pay means more child support payments, as well as an increase in the interaction between non-custodial parents and their kids, and then a cascade of other benefits for those children, and overall higher compliance. So let's add up all of that. The legal aid helps make a difference for securing child support. Most parents don't get legal help. And we get higher compliance and more parenting time when child support orders best reflect a parent's real circumstances. So on the next slide, all of that adds up to this, which is this language that was added to the new federal child support rule, and why the Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement, under the leadership of Commissioner Vicki Turetsky, who's familiar to many on this call because of her prior work at the Center for Law and Social Policy. But this is why when Commissioner Turetsky and her staff undertook the first overhaul and modernization of the child support regulations in 30 years, that they included this important clarification about 4D funds, no question, can be used to support pro se services. For years, a small handful of states had been tapping these 4D funds for self-help legal services, mostly inside courthouses. But the lack of clear authority really contributes to a reluctance from some states to explore it further. So that's why it's a really big deal that the new rule says clearly, yes, you can. And this is the magic language. Federal financial participation is sort of a fancy phrase for the state's ability to use federal funds. So translating this, that means that states can use their federal Title 40 funds to provide services to increase pro se help for eligible child support families when it's for providing child support services. And as Gail referenced, and Renee will talk about because it's all outlined in the guide, the bottom line is that the feds will pay for 2/3 of 4D, qualifying funds to a state's 1/3 match. To support, for example, the kind of work Gail was describing, self-help centers, hotlines, online forums, etc. So that's why it's just so great. Thank you again, SRLN, for updating your how to 4D guide consistent with the new rule. So next slide. The Federal Office for Child Support Enforcement, it's really this support for pro se legal services permeates all of these various programs. My bet, Gail, is that your visitation funds from your State Department were these Federal Access and Visitation Program funds. But anyway, these are, and SIP, the Special Improvement Project grant, was also a source of funding for Gail's work. But anyway, all to say that there's broad recognition in the Office for Child Support Enforcement about the importance of these kinds of partnerships. Next slide. So this list just helps illustrate the kinds of legal help that can potentially be eligible for the 4D federal reimbursement. It's just worth pointing out, it's always self-help support. It's always serving both the custodial and non-custodial parents. And it includes both what's obvious about what legal services does for child support regarding orders and modifications, but also some less obvious examples. So about when federal reimbursement can be available, like for domestic violence protection orders, when getting that is necessary to obtain child support, right? And it is also available to help provide help for non-custodial parents with respect to the array of tools that child support agencies are required by federal law to consider. So for example, there's been a lot of attention in the legal services community of late around driver's license revocation, which is one of those federal tools. And it becomes a major obstacle to non-custodial parents' ability to make a child support payment. So help there, just an example of where help can be really, really beneficial. Okay, last slide. And this is, will soon be a handful of collaborations between child support agencies and courts and legal aid providers around the country, just to illustrate the range of creative kinds of innovations underway. Some are with 4D funds, some are not. That could be a whole other webinar, which depending on interest, maybe there'll be a part 2. but we're happy to spotlight the South Carolina example in particular. And so now, Renee, it's yours to tell everybody about the guide.
Great, thank you, and Karen, and thank you, Gail, and your colleagues as well for queuing this all up. And thank you for inviting me to talk about the recently revised Title 4D Resource Guide. My name is Renee Dancer. I'm the Deputy Director at the Self-Represented Litigation Network, and you can see my contact information is there. I do encourage you to go ahead and ask questions when in the chat box or at the end so that we can have a dialogue. And I'll show my contact information one more time. So if you find you have questions or want to talk more about how to use this guide to create strategic partnerships in your jurisdiction, feel free to reach out to me at any point. Claudia, you can go ahead to the next slide. So first, I just want to orient you to where you can find the guide. I believe that Claudia has included it in materials that will go out with this webinar. But you can find the URL for the guide here on this slide. You can also, this is a long URL, so you could also merely navigate to the SRLN website, which is srln.org, and type 4D into the search bar. You'll get this and other resources related to Title 4D funds. The guide itself has not only a substantive understanding of the history of the Title 4D program and a framing of where we are today, but includes some strategies for success in collaboration and a host of templates in the appendices. So those are really worthwhile to comb through and just take a look at. Next slide, please, Claudia. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office of Child Support Enforcement, which you saw on Karen's slides, is often referred to as the OCSE, is the federal government agency that oversees the National Child Support Program. A major obstacle to maximum program efficiency and effectiveness for state administrators of child support programs is that most parents go through the system without legal help of any kind. So to emphasize that self-help services qualify for Title 4D funding, as Karen mentioned, the OCSE clarified that funding can be used to increase self-represented litigants' access to courts and administrative and alternative dispute resolution processes. Next slide, please. So the resource guide is intended to facilitate and support cooperation between state Title 4D child support agencies and state courts to provide self-help services to parents and others who are engaged in paternity establishment and child support establishment, modification, and enforcement processes. So this is where I want to take a moment to stop and highlight the main parameter around use of this funding. We're going to dive deeper into what kind of services qualify, and Karen gave a nice list as well. But I hope you'll find that this isn't as limiting as it may seem at first blush once we get to that deep dive. But it is important to remember that in order to qualify to use the funding associated with Title 4D, your program must facilitate the establishment of paternity or parentage or a support matter, modification of a child support matter, or enforcement of a child support matter. Next slide, please. It's important to remember that if your court isn't the entity that primarily manages child support matters, or if your court isn't proving to be a great partner, you have other options. So legal aid and other community-based organizations can also partner with Title 4D agencies to use child support funding to provide appropriate self-help services. Over the years, the trend has been to expand the system and move its focus from a collection system intended to force non-custodial parents to reimburse the state for welfare expenses to a system focused on child well-being, which is intended to support families both by ensuring appropriate and timely child support contributions and by encouraging the participation of non-custodial parents in their children's lives. The state legislature or the 4D agency generally decides whether the 4D agency will enter into or approve cooperative agreements with other government entities or contracts with other community organizations to provide child support services. So this is the agency with which you want to develop a relationship. If you aren't sure who your 4D agency is or want some guidance on establishing this relationship, or if you are a 4D agency and want to explore partnerships with courts or community-based entities, feel free to reach out and we can help at least connect you. Next slide, please. So the incentive to establish these types of self-help programs and resources really is fostering a community of families that are healthy, happy, and able to sustain their own lifestyle. But if you feel like you need some carrots to encourage your community partners to collaborate, here are some things to keep in mind. The federal government reimburses states for 66% of most categories of paternity and child support establishment, modification, and enforcement related expenses. This means that most of the funding that you and your partners would need to put into this program will be reimbursed. States or jurisdictions are required to put up a 34% cash match, but the majority of the funding will come from the appropriation made as a result of Title 40 in the federal government's budget. The guide discusses how self-help services targeted to this population may help increase the incentive factors for bonus money to the jurisdiction from the federal 4D program, and I put bonus in quotes there. I encourage you to look at this section closely and then really think through what carrot may exist for your 4D agency. What matters most to them? The guide goes into details about different types of incentive funds that are issued to jurisdictions meeting certain goals. And the guide further goes into detail about how creation of these strategic partnerships and providing more robust assistance can increase likelihood of achieving these goals for incentive funds while simultaneously creating more effective assistance for families. Next slide, please. Great. So this slide is really a good, the similar summary to what Karen put up as what is reimbursable, but I do think it's important to just take a look closely at some of the examples of programs and services you can offer. So in the 2016 revised rule specifically allowed child support funding to be used for services to increase self-represented litigants' access to adjudicative and alternative dispute resolution processes in child support cases. And so one example of the use of these funds was the California Family Law Facilitator Program. That program started merely assisting with Title 4D matters and used Title 4D funding to start it, but then was able to expand their program to a robust amount of family law matters, acquiring funding for in other ways. So Section 2 of the guide gives all of the reimbursable self-help programs that could be offered. So you see the summary on this slide and on Karen's slide prior. But things like providing information on process, forms preparation, creating and presenting workshops and classes. And then there's also more in-depth activities like drafting and filing responsive responsive pleadings. But it's just important to remember those parameters that we laid out in the beginning. Establishment, modification, or enforcement of paternity or parentage of the child support case. So employees who work part-time on 4D activities of note can you can still have let me start this again. Employees who work part-time on 4D activities and part-time on other non-reimbursable activities have to keep timesheets to document their time on each of the activities. You can still be reimbursed for their 4D activities, but you also have the ability to request the OCSC office approve another method for determining the cost allocation of the employee's time. So I just want to highlight that caveat because it may be worth your while to propose another method if you think tracking time on activities may be overly cumbersome. It's important to remember this, though, and to think about the California Family Law Facilitator Program as an example, because it shows that you can incorporate these services into a bevy of other services offered in the same program as long as you can identify the 4D reimbursable activities and fund the rest in other ways. So this can allow you to have the efficiency and customer focus of a one-stop shop while still allowing you to take advantage of the funding on the table. So that's a brief summary of some of the things that you're going to find in the guide. I did mention that there's a number of appendices with a lot of templates, so I do encourage you to take a look at the guide as well as those appendices and think through how you are able to create some of those strategic partnerships and take advantage of some of that funding to assist families with their child support matters. And Claudia, if you could just navigate to the final slide. I just want to make sure everyone has a little information about the SRLN. We're a nonprofit entity that connects lawyers, judges, and allied professionals who are creating innovative and evidence-based solutions so that self-represented litigants have meaningful access to the courts and get the legal help they need. You can join the SRLN for free by navigating to the website that you see there listed, and you also see my contact information listed again. And we're happy to help guide you through the process of creating these strategic partnerships to improve your service delivery for child support matters. And with that, I will throw it back to Claudia, and we can take any questions that may have arisen.
Thank you all. Thank you, Karen and Renee, for the sharing and breaking down a little bit the new opportunities and changes. I'm going to open it up for questions. So if anybody has a question, I'm seeing a question in the chat box from Bethany Taylor. So I'm going to read it, and I think the question is for Gail. But Bethany, I'm gonna unmute you also right now. The question is, did you make the videos in-house or contract with a vendor? And I think the question is for our partners in South Carolina.
We contracted with a vendor. Now, we did tell them a couple times, reminded them we were their charity case. Because, I mean, they did it for us at a very reasonable rate. They were young folks that had just started a new company. We thought they did an excellent job for us. We did not spend any money on the back. I mean, that was in an office where the videos were shot. I mean, the video costs themselves are expensive for any of these companies, but we didn't have cost of having like to go out on site somewhere. They did a lot of graphics for us. We had done, as part of our grant, we were able to get money from a focus group, and we found that that was really an effective way to present. So you will see, if you look at the videos, a lot of slides in there with graphics on them. But we did contract that out.
Thank you, Pat. Anybody else have any questions or comments or want to share? Maybe some of you already are doing work on child support in collaboration with other groups, the courts and the legal aid and maybe the bar, other groups. Anybody else want to share? I will mention the Turner case that came down. It feels like a long time ago. But it was the case that actually came to the Supreme Court, where it said that courts needed to be a little bit more proactive about using forms to communicate with their litigants. And the case was originally, I believe, a child support enforcement case that came from, I don't remember if it was South Carolina or North Carolina. So, you know, I think that in the context of figuring out how to help people, forms can be a pivotal tool, a very important tool that can be kind of modular, like a Lego. And for purposes of the South Carolina project, a lot of the forms continue to be used. The project was done about 5 years ago, right? Was it longer than that? Do you remember, Pat or Gail?
When we did part of it in 2014. We started in 11. But that was just kind of organizing. The forms actually got out, I think, 13 or 14.
So, and they continue to be used with very little effort, because once they're online and people know to refer to them, they continue to be used both for enforcement and petitioner respondent, to the tune of about 150 documents that are created for free on LHI. So, you know, once you set them up, if you maintain them and if the relationships continue to refer, it is a tool that continues to contribute, even if it's not a project that's actively being worked on. So it's a great investment, particularly if your staff is going to go up and down or there's going to be changes. The technology can continue to provide the services. So wondering if anybody else has any questions or comments. Anybody who wants, raise your hand and I'll unmute you. No? Okay. Well, then we will wrap up. I really, really thank SRLN for giving us an overview of the guide. and Karen and Gail and Pat and Ken for being with us today. If there's interest in continuing the conversation, like Karen said, that we could talk about the other funding streams that could be used for similar assistance, let me know. If there's enough interest, we could put together a call like child support parte dos, part two, if that's of interest to all of you. And if any of you on the call want to talk or brainstorm about this anytime in the future, you can always reach out to me. If you're with legal aid and you're already doing forms or you're thinking about using online forms, reach out to me. If you're with the courts or you want to approach a Title 4D, Renee actually shared with me that she can really find the best contact for you on your state in that regard. So we're willing to be resources here. We think that this could have a great benefit for eventually the child. So stay in touch and keep us posted. And if you decide that you wanna figure this out, we'll support you and share what we know and put you in contact with other states that have done this or have successfully completed a project. Everything that's an LHI is shareable, so if you create forms, we can share that. And on a technical front, we do have a contributor, a technical little library that we can give you if you're creating family law forms that will help you expedite the creation of the templates. And we call it the Family Law Contributor Kit. And that's a very technical thing, but just FYI, what's in LHI is shareable. So with no more to say, unless one of my panelists wants to say anything else. Anybody else? Oh, I see a hand. Hold on. I have a hand from our partner, Murney in Nebraska. Murney, I'm gonna unmute you.
Hi.
Hi.
Just, this is very fascinating. Legal Aid of Nebraska has a number of clinics that are designed for pro se use, assisted pro se, and we've got a number of forms, and it has to do with changing child support orders and changing child support orders to get visitation. Our problem has been hooking the 4D agency and getting their interest in funding something like this. And it looks like it's essential to have the 4D agency in order to get funding from the Office of Child Support Enforcement to continue doing these clinics. Does the question make, what tack would you recommend I take with the 4D agency to pique their interest?
This is Karen, and I would suggest two things. One is read SRLN's guide cover to cover, so that you're fluent in how it all works and the challenges and burdens they have in administering these federal funds, so that you're knowledgeable. And also really document the difference that Legal Aid in Nebraska is making for your 4D agency, so that you can really get it down to the, to the bottom line of how it is you're helping, and how it is that, boy, if you could only expand it, into these different areas and multiply the number of clinics, and help meet the needs of more parents in the state, that you'd help them reach their goals. And in particular, studying the part of the guide that goes to incentives to the 4D agencies that they hope to meet, because that can also translate into additional funds for them.
Yeah, Karen, this is Renee. That's what I would say too, is to really focus on that portion of the guide that goes into the incentive funding, that bonus money portion we talked a little bit about, and just take a look at the different incentive funds there are, and see how your services are increasing their odds at getting to more of that incentive funding.
Thank you both.
Really great suggestions. And anybody else have a question or comment or want to share about a project? Okay, well, we will circulate via the list the materials and the recording, and anybody can reach out to me. I'm at cjohnson@probono.net. And I'm sharing the time and place for the next call for the LHI community. And it's going to be more of a technical topic that's going to be led by Capstone Practice. And hope I will be distributing that to the list too. And hopefully this get some of you thinking about how to do more child support and get the collaborations going at the local level. And thank you to all of our wonderful presenters and everybody that came to the call. I hope to see some new projects developing in the cooking room. Thank you all.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.